Chapter 6. Kaelen. The Weight of Shadows. The sun hung sharp over the temple square, spilling white light across the pale stone and casting the great spires in long, jagged shadows. Kaelen squinted against the brightness, tugging his cloak tighter around his shoulders as if the cloth could soften the edge of the city pressing in on him. Izzi had gone her way, quick and eager as always. Renlyn vanished into the quiet sanctum of the temple, but Kaelen remained where he stood, boots rooted to the cobblestones as streams of townsfolk swept around him like water around a stone. He hated cities, not simply for their noise or their clutter, but for what they pretended to be. Clean, safe, untouchable. Every doorway was a shelter from rain, every wall high enough to keep the wild at bay. Yet Kaelen could smell the rot beneath the perfume, the hunger hidden behind silken smiles. He knew these people thought themselves safe, and that falsehood dug into his chest like a splinter. And beyond all else, he hated the stairs. A group of children spotted him first, whispering with wide eyes before scampering back to their mothers. One man, heavy-set and red-faced, went out of his way to cross the street rather than pass too close. A pair of guards watched him from their post, not approaching but resting their hands a little too comfortably on their hilts. Even here, far from the frontier, an orc was still a monster in their eyes. Kaelen's tusks clenched tight as he exhaled through his nose. He moved on. Each step sent ripples through the crowd, people peeling away, leaving him a bubble of space. It should have felt liberating, but instead it only reminded him how alone he was, how separate. Kaelen wandered until the noise of the market dulled into something tolerable. A small courtyard opened before him, shaded by an old oak whose roots twisted through the stone. The sight pulled something from his memory, and he sat heavily on a bench, letting the weight of the day sink into his bones. He thought of Izzi, the first time he had seen her. Gods, what a sight she had been. A wild thing, teeth bared, cornered like a wolf against spears, the whites of her eyes flashing. Dangerous, beautiful, alive. The battlefield had shaped them both, but in her he'd seen a mirror. Rejection, disdain, abandonment. Two creatures bound not by trust but by survival, learning that standing back to back was better than standing alone. His hands flexed against his knees. He had told himself it was practicality that made him stay at her side all these years. She was cunning, resourceful, deadly in ways that complemented his strength. But now there was Renlyn, and Kaelen saw something he hadn't expected. A thread between Izzi and the scribe, fragile yet real. He wasn't blind to it, wasn't deaf to the way her voice softened sometimes, or how her gaze lingered. Maybe he should have told her not to leave the boy alone. Maybe it would have been kinder, for both of them. But watching Renlyn blossom these past days, Kaelen couldn't deny the truth. Izzi was starting to seem different around him, a bit softer in moments. Opening her doors maybe? Kaelen pressed his tusks together, the sound low and grinding. He wasn't sure what to make of it. A shout pulled him back to the present. A drunk stumbled from a nearby tavern, tripping over his own feet before catching sight of Kaelen on the bench. His bleary eyes widened, mouth twisting into a sneer. "Filthy half-breed," the man spat, though his voice trembled. Kaelen stood, not quickly, but with a weight that carried its own warning. The man froze, all bravado vanishing beneath the shadow Kaelen cast. For a heartbeat, Kaelen considered closing the distance, considered letting the rage that always simmered just below the surface rise and consume. But then he looked past the man, at the watching crowd, at the guards already shifting uneasily at their post. He swallowed the fire, turned his back, and walked away. Their whispers followed him down the street, but so too did a thought, stubborn and unwelcome. Perhaps Izzi is right. Perhaps the boy is right. Perhaps there is more to this world than fear and blades. And yet, even as the thought took root, Kaelen's jaw tightened. Cities still had teeth. He would not forget it. Kaelen left the jeers and whispers behind, shoulders squared, though the city's pulse still gnawed at him. As he moved deeper into the winding streets, the scent of incense and roasting meats began to drown the stench of refuse. Merchants called from their stalls in sing-song voices. Fabrics fluttered like banners, and above it all, temple bells tolled a slow, resonant hour. He cut through the crowd with ease, people slipping aside like reeds before a current, but not everyone flinched. From the corner of his eye he caught movement. A young boy, no more than 12, weaving too purposefully through the throng. Kaelen slowed, hand brushing the pommel of his blade. Sure enough, the boy's fingers darted for the pouch at his belt. Kaelen caught his wrist in an iron grip. The boy froze, eyes wide, lips parting in a panicked gasp. But beneath the fear, Kaelen saw something else. Hunger. Desperation. It wasn't the first time he'd seen it. "You've got guts," Kaelen rumbled, voice low enough not to draw attention. The boy trembled in his grip, but didn't bolt. "But if you want to live long enough to grow tusks, you'd best learn when not to bite." The boy's gaze darted past him to a shadowed alley where a thin figure lingered. An older man, sharp-faced, arms crossed, watching, controlling. Kaelen let the boy's wrist go, deliberately slow. "Run." The boy hesitated, then obeyed, darting back to the waiting man. But Kaelen's eyes locked with the older ones, and in that single heartbeat, Kaelen read the whole story. A cut-purse's den, children used like bait, their lives bartered for coin. He should have turned away, it wasn't his fight, not today. But the memory of Izzi, feral and cornered, bit into him, the battlefield feeling. He couldn't just let it go. Kaelen followed. The alley bent twice, then widened into a courtyard that stank of smoke and spilled ale. Half a dozen men lounged there, knives at belts, with one figure standing out among them. He was tall but wiry, built on sinew rather than muscle, his cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. A jagged scar ran from the corner of his left eye down across his jaw, pulling the skin taut so that his sneer seemed permanent. His hair was greased back, dark and thinning at the crown, though he carried himself with the arrogant confidence of a man who thought himself untouchable. His coat, a long, wine-colored thing that might have been fine once, was patched at the elbows and frayed along the hem, but he wore it like a nobleman's mantle. A thin stiletto dagger dangled at his hip, more for show than for strength, its hilt polished from years of being drawn to impress and intimidate. The boy Kaelen had seen earlier now lingered behind the man's shoulder, eyes downcast, shrinking into himself. The scarred man ruffled his hair almost fondly before looking Kaelen over like a butcher inspecting a carcass. "Well, well," he drawled, voice rich with false amusement. "Look what the street dragged in. A beast, ripe for caging." The others chuckled on cue, though their laughter rang hollow, feeding off the confidence of the scarred man more than any conviction of their own. Kaelen said nothing. His hand closed around the hilt of his great sword, the leather wrapping worn smooth by years of battle. He did not raise it. Yet. But the courtyard seemed to shrink as his shadow stretched across the stones. Kaelen's voice rumbled low, deliberate, the kind of growl that carried steel even without a blade in hand. "You can walk away. All of you. No blood, no broken bones. Leave the boy, and I'll forget I saw you." The scarred man's smile widened, though the corner of his mouth twitched with the effort of holding it. "And let the beast have the last word? No, no. That wouldn't do." He spat to the side, then raised his hand in a lazy signal. His men shifted, hands straying to knives, clubs, even a rusted spear. Kaelen's grip tightened. He knew it. He always knew it. Men like these never turned aside when pride was at stake. Before the first blade could flash, a voice cut across the courtyard like a trumpet. "Well, isn't this a fine mess of piss and pride?" A figure shouldered his way into the ring of light. He was tall, broad-chested, dressed in a mismatched patchwork of leather and mail that had seen too many battles and too many taverns. His cloak was bright crimson, a garish choice that clashed with the grime of the alley, but he wore it with a grin so confident it might as well have been royal silk. His hair was golden, catching firelight in a halo, and his smile was the sort of thing that turned foes into drinking companions, or drinking companions into corpses. "Horian Hail," he announced with a dramatic bow, as though everyone should already know the name. "Sword for coin, wine for life, and no patience for carrion." The thugs hesitated, thrown off balance by the sheer volume of him. Horian strode right up beside Kaelen, clapping a hand onto the orc's massive shoulder as if they were lifelong comrades. "Gods above, friend, you do know how to pick an audience. Look at these scrawny weeds, you're terrifying them already. Don't worry, I'll help you scare them off." Kaelen shot him a sidelong glare, uncertain if he was an ally or an idiot. Probably both. The scarred man snarled. "Another fool. You should have stayed out of this, golden boy." Horian threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing off the stones. "Golden boy. By the gods, I like you already. But you've got it all wrong. I'm not here to fight you." His smile sharpened, teeth flashing. "I'm here to bury you." That broke the tension like a hammer to glass. The thugs roared, rushing forward in a tangle of blades and curses. Kaelen's greatsword came free with a hiss of steel, his massive frame shifting into motion. Horian was just as quick, a long saber appearing in his hand, its edge catching the firelight. The courtyard exploded into violence. steel screamed as Kaelen's greatsword left its sheath. The massive blade looked impossibly heavy, yet it moved as if it were an extension of his arm. His stance widened, boots grinding against the cobblestones, every muscle in his frame coiled to strike. The scarred man's gang surged forward, a knot of blades and clubs aimed to overwhelm. Kaelen met them like a wall. His first swing carved through the air in a wide arc, forcing 3 men back at once. Sparks burst as iron scraped iron, the sheer force of his blow rattling their bones even through their weapons. And then, Horian Hail leapt into the fray. Where Kaelen was weight and gravity, Horian was lightning. His saber flashed like a tongue of fire, his footwork dazzling, sidesteps, spins, lunges that seemed more like a dancer's than a sellsword's. He laughed with every strike, the sound ringing louder than the clash of blades. "Ha! Too slow, too clumsy. Gods, you make this too easy," he roared, cutting down a thug with a flourish so dramatic it almost seemed mocking. Kaelen grunted, cleaving aside another man with brutal efficiency. He found his eyes following Horian's movements, almost despite himself. The man's speed was undeniable. He slipped between attackers like water spilling through cracks, every motion precise. His blade darted, quicksilver, puncturing defenses before the enemy even realized they'd been left open. One thug lunged low toward Kaelen's side. Before the orc could pivot, Horian's saber was there, batting the strike wide. "Watch your ribs, friend," he bellowed, grinning like a madman. Kaelen's tusked mouth curled into the faintest ghost of a smile. "I had it." "Of course you did, but it's more fun this way." Another brute came at Horian with a hammer swing overhead. Horian dropped low, cloak swirling, his saber flicking upward to pierce the man's thigh. The thug screamed, stumbling back, just in time for Kaelen's greatsword to crash into his shoulder, splitting him like wood. The courtyard became a blur of movement. Together, they were terrifying. Kaelen anchoring the battlefield, his blows shaking the ground, while Horian spun and shouted, a golden storm cutting down stragglers before they even touched the orc. The scarred leader watched, his confidence draining with every corpse. Sweat gleamed along his temple. He barked a command, but his men were faltering, tripping over their own fear. Kaelen's sword dripped crimson, his breathing steady, gaze cold. Horian, still laughing, twirled his saber with a flourish, pointing it at the scarred man like an accusation. "Well then," Horian drawled, voice rich with mockery. "Still think you're walking away from this with your pride intact?" Kaelen planted his sword tip against the stones, resting his massive hands upon the hilt. His silence was heavier than Horian's taunts, a promise of finality. The scarred man's face twisted, caught between rage and fear. The last act of the fight was about to fall. The scarred man made his last mistake. He lunged, desperate to reclaim his standing. Kaelen shifted just enough, his sword arcing downward with finality. The man collapsed, his lifeblood spreading across the cobblestones, a silence falling like a curtain as the last of the gang fled or lay broken. Kaelen exhaled slowly, lowering his blade. The weight of the fight was gone, but his body thrummed with the aftershocks of violence. Without a word, he began walking among the fallen, heavy steps echoing. One by one, he collected their purses, rough leather, stitched cloth, jingling with ill-gotten coin. When the work was done, he returned to the boy cowering near the alley's edge and set the small heap down at his feet. "Yours," Kaelen said simply, voice low, final. The boy's eyes widened, speechless. Behind him, Horian let out a bark of laughter, wiping blood from his saber with a dramatic flick. "By the gods, you've got a kind soul in there, my tusked friend. You crush bones like granite, yet leave silver for strays. Poetic, really." His voice carried, filling the whole square. Kaelen gave no reply beyond a grunt, but Horian clapped him on the shoulder anyway. "You and I? Ha! We'd make a killing together, I swear it. 2 blades, 1 mountain and 1 flame. The sellsword guilds would whisper our names in awe." He gestured grandly, as though painting their future in the air itself. "I'm not interested," Kaelen rumbled. "Of course you're not." Horian threw his head back, laughing, unbothered by the refusal. "But if fate ever drags you south, find me. Coastal city of Cerulea's Rest? Ah, the bluest waters you'll ever see, white sands, a tavern where the wine runs like rivers. And the women? Gods, beautiful. Tell the innkeeper my name and you'll have a bed and drink for days. My thanks for your steel this evening." Kaelen's brow arched slightly, filing the name away without comment. Then Horian suddenly stiffened, eyes darting beyond Kaelen. A grin split his face wide, wolfish. "Ah, and here comes trouble." From the far end of the square, armored boots clattered. Torches bobbed in the dusk as a squad of guards pushed into the street, voices sharp. "Guards!" Horian bellowed, already darting backward like a fox on the run. "Run, my friend, they're on to us." Ha! And just like that, he was gone, saber flashing in the firelight as he vaulted over a low fence, laughter echoing into the night. Kaelen stood for a heartbeat longer, his massive frame silhouetted in the torchlight, before turning into the shadowed alleys, his path silent, deliberate, already vanishing into the labyrinth of the city. The guards' shouts pierced the dusk, torches flaring bright in the square. Kaelen's shoulders tensed. He had no quarrel with city law, not tonight, not with the scribe's mission hanging in the balance. Trouble here would mean chains, wasted time, and eyes fixed on them when they could least afford it. His hand went to the hood at his back, tugging it up to shadow his tusked features. With a single glance at the approaching squad, he turned and slipped into a narrow alleyway. The cobblestones were slick with evening damp, the streets a twisting maze. Kaelen's size should have made him easy prey to follow, but he knew how to move. Years in forests, ruins, and war camps had taught him when to be thunder, when to be silence. Now he was silence. Boots hammered behind him, voices echoing. There! To the left! But every corner gave him distance. He ducked beneath a hanging line of laundry, pushed through a shutter half open, and emerged into a tighter lane, his footfalls muffled by the littered dirt. A cart rolled past, oxen groaning under its load. Kaelen slid behind it, pressing low as the guards rushed by. His breath stayed steady, controlled, though his muscles were wired tight with readiness should they double back. When the danger passed, he ghosted from shadow to shadow, never hurrying more than needed, his strength spent on patience rather than panic. By the time the torches dimmed and the shouts faded into the distance, the city had quieted again. The air carried the faint tang of the sea, gulls crying somewhere overhead. Kaelen paused beneath an old stone arch at the edge of a market square, pulling his hood lower still. He had not been seen, not truly, only a shape in the dark, a phantom retreating into alleys. That would be enough to keep them from looking too closely. As night thickened, he allowed himself a slower pace, heading toward the outer wards where the taverns and inns waited. His heart was calm again, though he could still hear Horian's laughter ringing in his ears, wild and untamed. By evening, Kaelen had vanished from the watchful eyes of the city guard, a shadow swallowed whole by the streets. He would return to the inn as if nothing had happened, only another face in the crowd, carrying his silence like armor. Kaelen was the first to arrive back at the inn, the last traces of sunlight still clinging to the skyline as lanterns began to glow across the streets. The building was a broad timber structure, its beams darkened by age and its door worn smooth by countless hands. A warm, yeasty haze of ale, roasting meat, and wood smoke pressed outward into the cool air, inviting and suffocating all at once. He pushed inside, hood still drawn, though no one paid him much attention. Just another tired traveler among dozens. The clamor of tankards, laughter, and the low drone of lute strings rolled over him. For a man who had spent more of his life under open skies, the walls felt close but tolerable. Kaelen made for the counter, sliding a few of the coins taken from the street toughs earlier that day across the wood. The barkeep nodded, wordless, and in return placed before him a brimming pitcher of dark ale, another of sweet wine, and a roasted chicken leg torn from its bird. Kaelen carried the small feast away without comment, the clink of the pitchers heavy in his calloused hands. He found a table in the corner, the firelight catching the bronze of his tusks as he drank deep. The ale burned pleasantly down his throat, the fat from the chicken slicking his lips. For a moment, his thoughts eased, and he allowed himself a simple wish, that the others' searches had turned up more fruit than his scuffle in the alleys. Still, he smirked faintly as he chewed. At least Horian had left him with something, if not answers, then the promise of coin, wine, and a free stretch of beach far from this city. A vacation. Strange word for a man like him. Stranger still how much it sounded like something he might accept. When his plate was clean, Kaelen rose and made his way to the top floor. The stairs creaked beneath his weight, and he leaned on the railing once he reached the gallery above the common room. From here, he had a clear view of the entrance below, the ebb and flow of merchants, guards, and travelers streaming in as the night grew deeper. He remained there for some time, silent, watchful, a dark shape in the glow of lantern light. His thoughts wandered, of Izzi's sharp grin and Celine's poisonous shadow, of the scribe's earnest eyes. A battlefield of hearts and pasts, he thought. None of them walked lightly, not even the boy. The door swung open at last, and Kaelen's gaze sharpened. Renlyn stepped into the inn, parchment and satchel in hand, his cheeks flushed not from drink but from something softer. He looked different, glowing even. The boy moved among the crowd with uncharacteristic ease, chatting with strangers, smiling with a freedom Kaelen had never seen on him before. Kaelen leaned heavier on the railing, lips curving into the faintest smile. He did not announce himself, did not break the moment. Instead, he watched, quietly pleased, silently guarding. The scribe had come far in so short a time. And perhaps, Kaelen thought as he poured himself another cup of wine, that was worth more than any rune or riddle.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.